Hello and welcome to today's webinar looking at the connection between your team and the value of your business. I'm Charlotte, Editor of Comms Business, and I'll shortly be handing over to Gary Smith from Venture Corporate Finance and Ali Acosta, a communication coach and business expert, who will explain how you can unlock your true business value. There will be time for questions at the end, so if any questions come up for you throughout the webinar, do add those into the Q&A panel that you should find on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. But for now, over to you, Gary.
Thanks, Charlotte. First of all, introductions as to who we are. I'm the Managing Director of Venture Corporate Finance. We are a specialist IT, telecoms and software specialist corporate advisory in the UK. We are dealing with mid-market size businesses on exits, M&A strategies, and business reviews. So we are in the market speaking to buyers and sellers on a daily basis about what is hot and what's not. And one of the key topics that has come up in the last 12 months and ever since the pandemic really is about the value of people in organizations. So it gives us a good chance to raise a topic about M&A and transactions that are out with the usual financial controls. We brought on board Ali Acosta from the Four Pillars today because she's an expert in communication, speaks to business owners on a daily basis and can give us a different insight really into what people are saying, how communication has changed and evolved over the last 3 years since the pandemic and lockdown, and really to give you some help, support and tips as to how to improve communication within your workplace. So I'll pass over to Ali to do an introduction and then we'll crack on with some questions.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I'm Ali Acosta, and that was a great introduction. I appreciate that. So I am the owner of the Four Pillars Group. We do one or two things. We write for businesses, and as you quite rightly said, I'm a communications coach. And why that's important is words are my forte. And throughout the kind of pandemic, the last 3 years, basically, we worked with businesses inside out from, okay, how are we delivering our message? How do we communicate internally? You know, we went through a whole roller coaster with a lot of our clients of we need to really buckle down. We really need to change now. Because I think what happened in 2020, a lot of businesses were forced to just stop coasting and actually really think about, okay, if we're going to survive this, how are we going to be differently? How are we going to be proactively? How are we going to stop just, you know, resting on our laurels and actually start acting with intent? Because we need to make sure that we're going to, first of all, survive a pandemic, which nobody knew was coming. We need to stay relevant ahead of our peers. And how do we not just survive, but actually thrive? So we were incredibly relevant more than ever in 2020. And, you know, in the last couple of years, that's continued through lots of different challenges. And communication is, although it's something that's always been important, it's now being seen as the priority as that it should be, which is really good. So that's kind of what's led us to where we are today.
Great. Thanks for that, Alia. So really understanding communication within the workplace. A lot more companies are a hybrid working environment. A lot of companies have gone pure to home working. How has communication changed? Give me an overview from the people that you're speaking to and your understanding of how communication has changed, Alia.
Well, it's changed substantially. Ultimately, the biggest change is that people are no longer working in the office, and why that matters is they can't just catch up in the hallway. They can't just, you know, lean over their computer, reach out to somebody and talk to them. Instead, they're now having to rely on digital tools. So they're using things like email, Zooms, Teams, Slack, you know, Asana, whatever the channel is. And on average, office workers are communicating up to 97% of their day in a digital format. Now, communicating digitally isn't the same as communicating in person. So now they've got this whole new soft skill to adopt. Unmanaged, that can be problematic. It can really eat into productivity and efficiency, because now something that could have taken literally 5 seconds turns into 40-minute video calls. You've got emails that are going to whole departments, and you've got 17 people trying to figure out, you know, what of this is relevant to them, and none of it is. So you've got having to communicate in a very different way anyway. And then the other changes are, you know, there's more information silos where people are just working within their own space. You know, it's more challenging now to support staff. Conflicts can be a bit more challenging to navigate, and communication as a whole can become a little bit more exhausting than it used to. So as businesses, we're dealing with a whole different landscape to what we were 3 years ago.
I think on top of that, you also have generational communication challenges. You have a group of new people coming into workforce that's very tech savvy, very remote tech savvy, likes the written communication, texts, and various different other communication. And then you've got at the latter part of that, you've got business owners who've been running their business for 25 years plus often, who have never had to deal with really Zoom and Teams and all of the other technologies that you've talked about. And that also gives a challenge as to how can technology impinge on the communication with the business, and how does communication really become a function of the business rather than a connector of the business as well.
Yeah, definitely. So go ahead.
No, and connection is really probably one of the key components. You've got communication, talking to each other, versus people who have come into a business, people who have joined a business and are growing through businesses, and people who have been there for 15, 20 years. It's connecting with them to maintain and drive a culture, and that is a key challenge. Communication is a good way of keeping things going, but the connection between people in your business to keep a culture going is a challenge across the board.
Yeah, and that's something that so the reason we're called the 4 pillars is because I created a 4-pillar philosophy to become better communicators. And the first pillar is so relevant to what you're saying. So before you put pen to paper, before you do whatever communication it is, like you say, exchange information, the first pillar to being a better communicator is awareness. Now, it's not just, you know, most of us will be aware to some point, but we don't know the soft skills of how to apply that into communication. And so that's knowing everything about us and about other people in our teams. And if you're a leader, like the people within your business, it's knowing, you know, what's your personality style? How do you receive information? What's your communication style? What are your values? You know, what's your purpose? What drives you? What are your goals and what are your fears? And that sounds so esoteric, but when it comes to business, it really is that important to know those things, because that's what you're saying there. That is the difference between just simply communicating with somebody and connecting with them. Because if you've got 3 people in your team and you know, okay, this person just picked up the phone, they're a talker, they don't deal with email correspondence. You've got one that's chatty and loves to send in wall of text, and you've got one that likes to get in and get out and just send bullet points. Yeah, those 3 people, if you don't manage that and you don't know that, especially when you're even when you're hiring in, what you're going to get is clashes, and you're going to create toxicity. You're going to have people that are unhappy within their working environment. You're going to have a lack of productivity, and that is simply from a lack of awareness. And when you can really deep dive, when you can really deep dive with people and you can draw out, okay, this is who I am, this is how I show up, and everybody within the business, everyone within the team knows that, you can start to work together incredibly cohesively. And that is the difference, like you say, between simply communicating and actually connecting as a team.
Yeah, I think communicating, if you're a business owner and you've been in a business for 15 to 25 years, that connection with a core group of people that's been with you for 5-10 years is slightly easier, because you understand their lives, you understand who they are, you've maybe been to weddings, you've maybe had them around. It's slightly easier. The newer staff and people joining a business, I guess, is where you've got dual challenges, and one of the challenges faced with people joining companies and working from home, coming in, doing a small induction or doing an induction remotely, that gives very different challenges to the company. And then, as we've seen, and I think there's a stat out just after Christmas, that HR issues after Christmas parties this year is the highest issues that they've ever had, because socially people joining companies and interacting in larger social groups is much harder for people to be able to understand the boundaries. And it's harder for people to understand what's acceptable and what's not acceptable when you're sitting at home for 4, 5, 6 months with Zoom and Teams calls and maybe some offline chats with some friends, and then all of a sudden you're put into a group of 15, 20, 30, 40 people. It becomes a new challenge for people. So really, what are your thoughts on the challenges facing onboarding new people and the interaction socially with the larger groups?
I'll answer that first with the new people, and then we'll move on to excuse me 1 second. We'll move on to the bigger groups. So what you were saying there about the HR example of people kind of coming from working from home to going into, it doesn't help when you then apply people full of alcohol as well. But what that comes down to is a lack of boundaries, a lack of obviously communication in the first place of what is expected, not only from what you expect from your staff, but the other way around. So that kind of comes from having a system in place in the first place. It's easier to embed that in somebody new. So we'll start with new starters. So when you're bringing people on, you can look at two things. You can look at who you're hiring, and you can look at kind of what that process looks like. Have you got a set structure? So the issue with working from home and going from a home environment to an office environment is businesses need to start doing this with intent. So for our business, we've been going for 6 years, and for the most part we've been work from home anyway, so it was no shock to the system. We knew what the structure was, we had the right tools in place, and so 2020 hit, it was just another day. But for other businesses, they commute an hour a day, they're used to going into the office, and all of a sudden, boom, okay, you've got your laptop, you got to work from home now. And what happened is most businesses they kind of fell into having to do work from home, and then they just stayed that way. So they just kind of went with it, winged it a little bit, and just figured it out on the fly. Whereas if you're going to be a business that operates with a work from home policy, which it can be successful, it can be profitable, it can be very valuable, you need to do it with intent. So you need to set the structures, you need to set the processes, and you need to talk about, okay, what do we do, how do we communicate, how do we expect you to operate when you are working from home? And so when you're hiring new starters, you can set this in place from day one. Now, something you said before, which was really important, was when you're a business owner, especially if it's a slightly smaller business, it's a little bit easier when it's long in the tooth. You've been going 25 years, your goddaughter or godparent or whatever to your CTO's child, or you're close and it's a close-knit community. But as it kind of grows and as things go, then you can't be everyone to everybody. And so that's where it's really important to, first of all, have your leadership team and kind of understand, okay, how can you still create that closeness? Whether it's leaders just have their own pods and it's their responsibility, and then you work with the leaders, or how do we make sure that people aren't coming into the company and then feeling alone? Because the massive difference between a new starter in an office and a new starter from home is that you're bringing somebody new into the mix. They don't know who their co-workers are. They don't see them on a daily basis. They might only see them that first time at the Christmas party after working for a company for a whole year. So, being able to find ways to bring people together from day one, create maybe a buddy system. So just having ways to get people plugged in. So that's how you avoid the challenges and then in terms of the process, it's kind of finding how do we bring our values and culture into the workplace, whether it's through something we do which is a tone of voice guidelines, so people know how to communicate, they know how we talk on each channel, we know what the business belief and value driver is, whether it's having weekly meetings or whatever it looks like for a business, you need those processes in place. And that's where some businesses maybe are finding a challenge because they don't have that. They're just winging it.
Yeah. And I think you've touched on some really good points there, Ali, with regards to processes and procedures to ensure that you're set up effectively. The talent market in the UK is very tough. Everybody knows that. In this space of IT and telecoms, the ability to maintain and retain your people is key for growth of an IT business and growth of a telecoms business, you're either going to continue to grow organically, which is by more people and hiring and recruiting more people and retaining and developing them, and or doing some M&A strategies. So, but most businesses will look for new people to come into the business, and they will look to onboard them in a way. Now, in your thoughts, is there a hybrid version that you think is best way of bringing somebody into the business? You've got all your processes, you've set up your structures. Is a hybrid way of induction a better way of integrating new people into the business, or do you think it can be done with 1 or 2 days in the office and then we'll just carry it on through Teams or Zoom moving forward?
It can be done. I think it's very important to look at the personality and the style of the person that you're hiring, because it's very much an individual experience. Because if you have a very social person that needs to be around people and then they're in this isolated work from home environment, that's not going to work. So I think there's no, hard and fast answers to that question. I think it very much depends on the nature of your business, the nature of what it is that you do, and your culture of your company as well. So for our company, for example, we're all writers, so we're all introverts. So the more introverts I hire, everybody's fine with that. We'd rather sit at home in the quiet. But if you've got a more buzzier experience, more sales experience, where people are more extroverted, that can cause problems. So I would say, to be able to make the decision for your own business, it would be looking at what is your culture, what is it that you do, what is it that you need to be able to output, and then you can decide. Because my staff, if I tried to get them back into the office, they would hate it. And so it's very much kind of looking at the dynamic within your own business and what to do. So if it's going to be useful for people to go in the office, then have a hybrid working. If people could work remotely and it's not going to affect your productivity, then there's no reason why you couldn't be a solely work from home organization either.
In terms of communicating with your team, and we're talking about your business here, how often do you communicate in a Teams, Zoom, face-to-face meeting? We have a very similar environment where we have some people in our office down in Guildford, then we've got some people in Manchester, some people in Newcastle, some people just outside London. We communicate probably 3 to 4 times a day, because we are communicators and we like communicating all the time. So we're actively communicating, but we also know a lot of that time that's pretty inefficient, because there's things, if we were together, which is impractical due to location, but if we were together, some of these conversations are 3 or 5 minutes, and a Teams call, they're 10, 15 minutes, maybe a bit longer. So in terms of just using your company as an example, how do you keep that communication going, and how often are you communicating?
That's a good question. And I would say that there's 2 different types of communication. There's the work-based importance, like what's due, what do we need to do, what are our deadlines, and there's just chatting, because I do actually like my staff. And there was a whole trial and error period where we started, and for me it was daily comms every day. I would ring every day, we'll plan out the day, and it was overkill. It was draining, and like you said, it's really inefficient. And I am very friendly with my staff, and I did find that sometimes we'd end up having a chat, and you end up having a 40-minute Zoom, and you're like, okay, well, this is the work day. So we had to kind of figure out what's the best way to do it. So what we do is we have like a start and a close to the week. So first thing Monday morning and the first thing Friday morning, we set out what our tasks are. And that's like the official, this is like our get together campfire. And then we've decided, okay, we've got a project management tool that we need. So I'll pick up the phone, obviously, if I need to for a project. But we try and keep the basic information shared to, WhatsApp, and we put it up on the project management tool to keep back and forth to a minimum. And then if it's a new client, if it's a new brief, then we'll just have a set Zoom and we have a time frame for it. So definitely Monday and Friday. And then on an as and when basis. And what we tend to do is we'll have every quarter, we'll have a get together. So instead of having those, 40-minute productivity and unproductive calls that I'm basically paying for, we then will go and do something fun. We'll have an away day. We'll, do bowling, go to a cinema or theatre, whatever it is that we enjoy doing, and we try and keep our day-to-day comms relevant to the business.
Okay, and what would your recommendation be if I'm a business owner of an IT company or a telecoms company? I work part-time in the business. I've built it over 25 years. What recommendations? So I'm not in the business every single day. I'm popping in and out, kind of checking the key points of the business and keeping the strategy and the business running. What recommendation would you give to me as a business owner to ensure that my business and my people in my business are communicating, connecting, and being efficient with all of that?
Again, good question. First of all, I would set my boundaries as to what that actually looks like. So you can't just expect it, but you need to say what you want and what you need and be consistent with it. So, for example, I have a VA and she does some basic admin tasks for me. And every day at 2:00, she sends me a report that I've put together. I want to know these things. So at a glance, I can know, okay, my business hasn't fallen apart because I know we've got this many orders, this many followers, this has happened, this is how many reports have come in, whatever. So I could say, okay, done. So first of all, I would figure out what I need to know that things are running smoothly, and set the precedent for what you need. And then once you decide what information you want and how you want it shared, be consistent with it. Because just because you're part-time doesn't mean your staff are. And if one week you want a report, next week you want a conversation, next time you forget, so you don't even ask. If you are inconsistent as a leader, it's going to be incredibly painful for your staff to try and, figure out, what does he want or what does she want this week? So figure out what you want, ask for how you want it, and be consistent with it.
Yeah, I think also it's for business owners and the gap often between new people who are very tech savvy and business owners who are used to communication via face-to-face, that it's also sharing that workload with people who are like-minded, people who can communicate with your team at the right level and in the right way as well. So, which is great. I think one of the big conversations that we are having, and we're speaking to large corporate buyers and private equity firms on a daily basis, and we're also speaking to small to medium size owner-led businesses. Is home working good? Is it coming to an end? Should I or could I move people back to a 4, maybe a 5-day week where they're working maybe 2 or 3 days? And it's a big debate, and I understand there's a little bit of sensitivity around whether working 5 days a week is right or wrong for people. Anyway, we as a business, from the conversations that we've seen, we see a large push from particularly the larger corporates to bring that collaboration, that communication back in-house, going to 3 days, possibly going to 4 days, possibly never going back to 5 days, but a creep to get back into more office-based working. They see when the pandemic started and everybody worked from home, there was a 5% jump in productivity straight away from people working from home. As you mentioned, they don't have to worry about the hours commute. People are putting an extra bit of work into their day every single day, and that was giving a lot of businesses a productivity spike. Now, the workers who are traditionally Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're starting to see a drop-off in productivity on Mondays, a drop-off in productivity on Friday afternoons, and people are starting to become very comfortable with what they're working. And then the days they're in the office, you mentioned it earlier, they're coming to the office, they get to see a group of people once a week, so the coffee chat isn't 2 or 3 minutes, it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, so the productivity goes down. So we are seeing a lot of and hearing a lot of businesses feeling a little bit more of a pinch about the efficiency of working from home, as well as the mental well-being of staff working from home. Do you think, and this is a pretty open-ended question for you, do you think that home working is starting to come to an end now? Probably will never be fully stopped, but you've got a generation of people who have been used to working and hired offices, bought offices, and had people collaborating together. versus now where a new hiring generation and recruitment is all about what's the flexibility for me. Do you think home working and office-based working can coexist?
I do. In short, I will expand on that. I think they can coexist, and I think the reason why, and I'm not to bang on the drum, I already have, but I think the reason why we're at this point of, it's getting a bit lax on a Monday and a Friday, and then we're catching up, is because we have, again, going back to what I said, is it's not, none of this has been with intent. So let's kind of draw a line in the sand and decide this is who we are as a business. This is what works, and this is what we expect to see. Because we've just kind of had this lull of, oh, we're working from home, we don't really know what that looks like, we're going to figure it out. Oh, hang on a minute, we want you back. Oh, hang on a minute, no, you go back for 2 days, go for 4 days, and it's very confusing. And so 2020 was considered the firing year, the great resignation year, where people were on furlough, people were getting fired because businesses couldn't afford to keep their staff. And then that was 2021, sorry. And then 2022 was businesses trying to claw back their staff, trying to get people back in the office. And then 2023, it's kind of like, well, do you want to come in? Do you want to quit? And people that have, and I know we're talking a lot about new starters, so I'm kind of thinking about both here, but when somebody's worked for your organization, like I'm trying to think, my Sam, my editor, he's worked for me for 5 years. Imagine if we'd gone through that. He would have gone through kind of 7 variations of working environment. He's not going to know whether he's coming or he's going. So I think it's hardly surprising there's this whole what do we do? And so I think in terms of if it's going to work to coexist, like I said, start fresh, decide, okay, this is our policy, this is what our company is going to be, and figure out what is best. Speak to your staff, find out how they work. So for me as a creative, and I can't do this unfortunately because of that's the time my clients are work, but generally I'll work really early and finish early, or I'll have a whole day to myself and I'll work late and I'll finish late. As the business owner, I need to be here 9 to 5 because that's when my clients are working. But if you can kind of analyze, okay, when do we need to be available for people? When do we get the best out of somebody? You can try and find the best way for your business, because there's no reason to say just because every other company is doing something that you should do the same. So think about your people, think about what you want. It's your company. And then just create those policies, create those systems, and again, be consistent with whatever it is that you choose.
Yeah.
That's how
and I think business owners, and I think one of the challenges business owners are really having just now is because the market for recruitment and opportunities for people is so buoyant, particularly for technical staff who have opportunities all over the country. Is maybe an owner wants to bring back an office-based working environment 3 or 4 days a week. But as we hear many, many stories, well, during the pandemic, they've gone and got a dog. So now they can't leave the dog at home. And I now drop my kids off at school at 9 o'clock. So I can't get in till much later. And I don't want to commute for an hour. So there's lots of pushback from staff. And that is, from a business owner's point of view, pretty hard, because they're stuck between a hiring position where to replace staff is very hard, and the loss of productivity versus the benefit of having in the office is tough, versus who is now making the decisions, the staff who are saying, well, I've got this, and this, and I won't, and if you don't want me to, then I'll go, versus the owner saying, I've been loyal to you for 10 years or 5 years, and this is what's going on. If I was a business owner of my business, I've had it for 15 years, and I'd like to try and get people into the office more, how would you help me? How would you help me with my communication to the team to help persuade them or help to bring them together, and the reasoning to bring them together?
First of all, I would ask, why is that important to you?
As a business owner, having more people collaborating, talking, and learning from each other face to face is much easier than it is for somebody to learn over a Zoom call. What I say to my team in the office here is very easy for other people to listen to, hear, learn, and develop. If they're based at home, then they miss all of that learning and develop, all that ad hoc learning and development, which is the 5 and 10 minute quick buzz session about, I'm doing this. What do you think about it? What's the best way to do this client? What's the best thing to put into this client? Oh, I put that there with this client. Oh, okay, I've just heard that. Now I know what to do. So the collaboration and learning ad hocly can give a much greater benefit than somebody who's maybe been in the business 2 or 3 years and is left to their own devices at home. So bringing them back in could be real benefit to them. It could be a benefit to them for their learning and development, for career-wise, and then obviously financially for them if that helps.
Well, you've got a few, because no communication is easy. There's no one straightforward way. It's always something that's one pick. So ultimately, you are the boss. It is your company. And if that's what you want, then that's set it that way. But if you are looking for something more layered and you want to be able to, okay, how can I get people on this way of thinking? How can I include people in that? The reality is, and this might be hard to hear, and this is just an example, but you might think that way. They might not agree. They might feel that actually I get this just fine from Zoom. So actually you just telling me that doesn't say anything. So what could work instead is have a session where you're working together as that being the strapline, that being the goal. Don't make it about, I want you back in the office. Make it about, I want to, like you say, I want to have the most, how can we increase the way that we learn from each other? How can we grow? And, even have it as a training session, bring someone in like myself externally or something, or sit down with them, have a meeting and get them to brainstorm ideas. And really what you're trying to get out is how they learn, what the style is. And hopefully if you've got the right team, if you've recruited in that way, people will then naturally come to that same decision as you're all on the same page, and then say, okay, well, how can we make this work? So you almost get them to make it like it's their idea and bring everybody in. If you've got a whole bunch of people that don't operate that way, don't learn that way, things to consider is, one, actually bringing them in is just because you want to. It's not actually going to improve efficiency at all. Or two is, if they don't learn that way, then it's going to have the adverse effect. So instead of seeing this as, I want you in the office, first of all, as a business owner, unpicking everything we've just said, is I'd ask why. Why do you want people in the office? What is that reason? And then I would speak to them staff and bring them in on that and ask them, how do they get to that same goal in their way? What do they need? And hopefully that all aligns, and the answer is, well, let's find a way to get you back in the office that works for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's a very good answer. Thanks. The flip side of that is people. Why would people want to go back in the office? And just giving a story about a friend of mine who's a tech manager in an IT firm in his early 30s. And one of the things he looks at, he's a career-driven individual, and he's back in the office 4 days a week. The office is flexi working, and there is actually no push to go back and work 4 days a week. They're quite happy with the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday working. His feeling as a career-driven individual is, I am working for an owner-led business. I want to be in the office. I want to showcase my skills, my experiences, my knowledge, my support for my team. And also, because I'm career orientated, I want the boss to see me working hard, committed to the organization, helping support all of the other people and the organization grow and develop. And I know if I'm working from home, the time with my managers and the owner of the business and the other leaders in the business, directors of the business, is minimized by working from home versus being face to face and allowing them to speak to me and me to be able to speak to them to really understand where they're taking the business and have those conversations. So from a people organization and a people-led focus and an individual, he's choosing to work because he's looking for a career path and knows that a career path is better for him to be seen and being in the office, learning, developing, and continuing to support the business that way, versus probably being a little bit more isolated at home, and that he sees that as a challenge in the coming few years, where people won't have the chance to be seen by their bosses, their directors, the leaders, because they have ad hoc communication and maybe once a quarter get-togethers, etc. Do you think that the next level of management, as people are coming through, will need to make a step change as well? Because leading people via remote communication is even harder than leading them face to face.
Well, there's two things. First of all, that the story that you just shared, thank you for sharing that. And that kind of leads into what I was saying. That's perfect, because if you're having those conversations, and the reason I said having somebody kind of like myself externally, because you might find that somebody might not want to share that piece of information with their boss. But if you have somebody else, then you can understand, who can, you know, confidentially to a point think, okay, well, this is a good outcome based on what your staff need, because sometimes people don't want to be honest to the boss. So just kind of understanding people's drivers and making a decision off the back of all of it, what's good for the business, what you want as a business owner, because it's your business, and also what your people would like. If you have those conversations, then you can start to make decisions off the back of that. And then honestly, I forgot your question, sorry. Do you remember what you asked? Oh, leaders. Yes, sorry. So you said about leaders saying a step change. Agreed. It is more challenging. And this is where, again, I'm not evading the question at all, but it's very much depending on the people in your business, because another layer I wanted to add was you've also got neurodiversity as well. So, you know, as a woman with ADHD and autism, the reason I like being away is I'm still career driven. I'm still, you know, all those things, but I obviously own the company. I'm not an employee. So I get why that. You will have people within the organization that will struggle to shine around other people. And so there are people that, you know, you've got your extroverts, you've got your introverts. So it's finding something that works for everybody. And in terms of the leadership question, yeah, it's finding something. And again, it's asking how people best operate, because some people need direct instructions. People just want to follow. Some people want to be left to their own devices and will shy away from micromanagement. And so it's really, ultimately, all of this is ironic because we're talking about communication. Just talk to your people. Find out what their needs are. When you're hiring new, you can obviously do that at the beginning phase, and then make a decision off the back of that, because just because it is harder to do it digitally doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And cultures don't need to disappear with remote working. I think if you're connecting with your people and you're actively and proactively communicating with your team and making sure that they're all part of the company ethos, then a company culture can thrive, and so can your company as a result of that. Overall, what we're really talking about is the more focus and support you give your people, then the people will support you and your business for growth and opportunities moving forward, which when you're looking at exits and selling businesses, then you want to make sure that you have everything, all your ducks in a row effectively.
Of course. And I guess this is one that kind of sits in your ballpark. So in terms of that kind of working culture, you know, how important is that for buyers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And if I was probably to go back 2, 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of acquisitions as the IT and telecoms market is consolidated and continues to consolidate at pace. Previously, you'd have as many buyers looking to acquire companies and look for synergies of staffing within their organization. So buying effectively really the customers and contracts of businesses and some key people to keep everything going. So back then, customers, contracts, key people, and then the buyer will look for as many synergies to get as much saving and profit out of the business. As we've come through the change of the labour market and recruiting staff, technical staff being highly sought after, support desk people, finance, sales, marketing, the whole range of people within your business, buyers are now equally looking at what is the strength of your team what value can your people add to our business, rather than look at what positions can we consolidate to make people redundant and get rid of. A lot more buyers are now talking about, we're buying the business. We're not just buying customers and contracts. We're buying customers, contracts, and really a workforce that can help our business continue to grow and thrive. On the flip side of that, so that's what they're buying. But the people in your business are key to transactions in many different levels. First of all, most businesses have an earn-out period. So once you sell the business and the buyer stands up in front of your business and says, hey, we are the new people, you really want to make sure that your people are on board and engaged for a period of time, because you will more likely as a business owner have a financial element weighted towards another 6, 12 months or 24 months down the line. So your people will be the ones that really are key in delivering a financial benefit to you when you exit a business. So that's a positive to keep everybody really engaged with the culture and the support of where you're going. Sometimes, though, the disconnect between working in an office altogether and knowing everything about everybody, seeing everybody on a daily basis, to working from home and losing that connection with your people can have pretty horrible impact upon transactions. And I'll give you an example of one where a seller was looking to sell his business. He's effectively a lifestyle business that he created. The buyer, he pitched his two key people as the people who are going to take the business forward, the sales director and the CTO, and total good guys, really pitched them well. And the buyer, during due diligence, wanted to speak to these people because they'd be the people keeping the customers' contracts and the technology going. The seller and the owner of the business was very confident, but what he didn't realize was there'd become a disconnect in the business that he really wasn't aware of. And the CTO was, first of all, more interested in what's in it for him and what would this transaction mean for him and his family. So his focus really wasn't on helping support the seller with great technology, forward-thinking tech that's going to help the business. He was thinking about himself personally. What does this mean for me? What money is this buyer going to give me? And what is my position in this bigger organization going to be? Which isn't really the focus that the seller wants the CTO to be focusing on. And then, on top of that, he gave feedback as to what he thought about everybody else in the organization, which is even worse, because if there's some niggles in the organization, which there had been over the last 2 years when they're working from home and people pulling more or less weight, resulted in a negative impact from the buyer against the two key people. And then from there, it's very hard to say, well, your CTO isn't exactly who we thought he was, and he's a bit of a moaner, and your sales director doesn't like your CTO, and they don't like each other, and they're meant to be running the business when you leave. So it leaves a massive conflict. And just not understanding the dynamics in your team and in that situation almost led to that transaction being pulled because the people were unreliable. So understanding your people and understanding how your people are interacting in the culture within your business and the communication within your business really, really can be a positive driver. What a great team, what a great bunch of people. We can really get on board with them. They can really thrive. Or it could be a very negative situation where they could almost cancel your transaction. And you've got that very negative situation there. There's a very positive situation where another business was looking to exit. CTO again, and it's nothing against CTOs, by the way. It just so happens it's just another example. But the CTO was seen as a very positive influence in the business, and that person has now gone on to become the CTO of a £3 million business, which was the selling company, has now gone on to become the CTO of a 40 million pound business because he was so good and so on board and so proactive and so positive that they promoted him once the business was sold into the acquirer's business and up to a senior position there. So what people need to understand is that your people are highly sought after. Who they are in the organization and what they do in the organization will be reviewed by buyers, and buyers are more than likely wanting them to stay and thrive in the bigger organization. What business owners need to really get a sense of is who are your people and how are they going to help support that transaction in a positive way. And be prepared that when it comes to you selling your business, that not everybody is going to see you as a seller and a business owner in the same way as they see you as the employer of the business.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense. And I think the good news to share is that that task isn't as monumental as it might seem. And if there are issues in the business, there is a fairly straightforward fix to it too.
Yeah, absolutely. And business owners and their team are generally pretty close and pretty tight. It's just understanding who your people are, understanding what drives them, and understanding that in a business sale, everybody's going to feel very nervous. There's lots of stories out in the marketplace that as soon as your business is sold, we're all going to be made redundant.
Yeah.
It's that communication as to who you're selling to and why you're selling to them and what's the plan for that staff. It comes back down to the communication of what's relevant to that individual. I'm looking for, I'm in a business of 15 people and we're a £5 million business and we're probably not really going to grow much further. And Andy, the sales director, has been here for 15 years. You probably don't have much more career opportunity other than leaving that business anyway. Whereas part of a much bigger organization, the opportunities will be much greater, and your opportunity to earn, career enhancements, training, development will always be much more in a 30, 40, 50 million pound organization than you will do in a small owner-led organization. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to be scared about it. Mm-hmm. You don't want to tell anybody before it's happened, first of all, because that's just not good news. But when it is happening and when it's happened and you're communicating to your team why, there's always an awful lot of very, very good stories and messages to give to the team as to what this can do for them.
That's so critical. I think what you said there about what it means to them is amazing, because what we'd already covered, obviously, is having those initial conversations to be able to communicate more effective in the first place. And when you're doing that, you know what their goals are. And so what you used there was an excellent example. We talked about the sales director where they want career progression, but you know that as an owner-led business, they're not going to get it. But this change is actually positive for them. So I think, recognizing the fact that not everybody deals with change the same, and being able to be prepared to go that extra mile for people that are a little bit more nervous, because it's okay that people are a little bit more nervous. People are naturally more risk adverse to others. And then being able to communicate that message effectively, not just, we're selling. And I thought it was really good what you said there about not doing it before the fact and getting all your ducks in a row first, so that what you do come out and what you do articulate is confident. You're not just bumbling through it with, I don't know what's coming next, because then that's where you get that fear factor.
Yeah, and when we speak to and when we're engaged with people looking to sell the businesses, we're very clear and we encourage the communication with the buyer. What is your plans for our team? What do you want to do? Who do you see that's at risk? And who do you see as a real benefit to the business? So you're very clear as to who the buyer is and what their plans are. And it may be a case that they see a pure consolidation of customers and contracts and they don't need your staff. That is the seller's choice to decide whether or not he takes that deal. But most of the deals that we have done, we've completed 5 deals this year, from a £1 million transaction all the way up to a £40 million transaction. And every single one of those deals, the people has been key. They haven't taken the highest offer for their business. They've taken the best offer for the business. And in actual fact, every single one of them, the people, the skills, and the experience in the business has been key to why the buyer has bought that business.
Love that.
Great. Alia, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time and your candid answers this morning. Really good to catch up. And back to you, Charlotte.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone at home for joining us today. If anyone does still have any burning questions, you can add those to the Q&A panel in the next couple of minutes, and we can get to as many as we can. But first up, this is kind of, I guess, looking for more of a summary from you, Gary. But how can a business ensure their team is rightly valued when they're approaching a transaction?
I think when you're looking at how your business is valued, you've got your traditional financial methods. When you're looking at your team, what you want to do is make sure that they are well-trained, well-disciplined, strong processes and procedures in your business. Your culture of your people are very well aligned to who you are and the business that you have, and that you have clear succession planning in place for your business. You are a business owner. You really want to be able to step away from your business and allow people to come up. So effectively make yourself redundant and use that leadership, training and development with the organization below you to raise the people up to a level where the business can allow you to go off and spend 6 months skiing and 6 months by the pool. That for a buyer will allow them to have the confidence that your business and its performance won't dip after an acquisition.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And what other areas feed into a business value?
When you're looking at a business value, you're looking at the strength of the relationships with the customers and the contracts. So again, who's owning those customers and contracts within your business, and how sticky are they? So how many services are your sales team selling into your customers? How long are your customers in contract with you? Who's looking after those contracts and the strength of those relationships? So customers, contracts, and your service and salespeople's relationships with those will be a key component to the longevity of your revenue.
That makes sense. And we are coming to the last kind of couple of questions that have come in so far. So if anyone is sat there with a burning question, do add that in so that we can get an answer for you. The next question is just asking how can a business owner or leader evaluate whether their team is helping to build their business value? And if they do spot any limitations, what steps can they kind of take to make their team more of an asset?
Do you want to take that one, Alia, first of all?
Oh, I was going to go after you, but the first thing that comes to mind is benchmark. So, for example, what we do is we do audits with our clients. So we go through processes. Every department, we look at what the processes should be, and we understand it from a client's perspective. And then we understand it from the staff's perspectives, and we see if they're aligned. So what the business thinks they're doing and what's actually happening, and what we're looking for is what the business is doing well, what the gaps are, what processes are broken, and where the team is struggling. So what that would then do is, if you do a benchmark for your own business, you can see, okay, where are the things that we need to improve on, which, Gary, I imagine you probably do a degree of that anyway. And then we just do it for a different purpose. We look from a communication perspective, and then training. What are the gaps? How can we make sure that, you know, our team is gelling if there is a problem, like the sales director and the CTO story, Gary, that you told me? That would have been really easily fixable because that wouldn't have happened overnight. So that would have been something that there would have been a trigger, which is harder to see if you're working from home. But there would have been an iceberg moment of eventually it's just blown up. So that could have been nipped in the bud through training, through coaching, through bringing them together, through finding different ways of working. So that's what I would say is audit and train. Gary, would you like to say anything to kind of add to that?
Yeah, I'm pretty old-fashioned, and I don't like analysis that leads to paralysis. So a lot of businesses now are in a situation where you have to monitor and manage people remotely a lot more closely, or feel you have to. But really having a good set of processes with KPIs and a good leadership structure that allows your people to deliver and over deliver with open communication and not too much KPI led. We must do this or have to achieve this is a good way of working. I think there's also what could business owners do that can help them on an exit strategy. A lot of people have added EMI schemes into the business so that they can share in the growth of the company when an exit happens, and there's a financial benefit for businesses on an EMI scheme. But overall, you're looking at your processes, you're looking at your procedures, you're looking at tracking and monitoring, and then you're looking at rewards and recognition.
Absolutely. And for anyone that's listening and is thinking that they might be approaching a transaction in the future, appreciate there are sometimes timings that are kind of dictated by what the business owner is looking to do. But what kind of time frame should someone be thinking about if they are kind of looking to sell or looking to buy?
The best time to start is always now. If you're looking to sell and you look to sell in 5 years' time, the best thing to do is start preparing now. The best thing to do to start that preparation stage is understand where you are, what you're doing, your positives and your red flags. So what is needing to change in your business to achieve the valuation expectations and the exit outcomes that you're looking for? If you start in 2 or 3 years' time and all of a sudden you have contractual issues in the business or HR issues in the business or a number of red flags because the business isn't set up to sell, then that just makes it harder down the line. If you set up with a review, and we offer a fully bespoke transaction readiness review for all prospects that we speak to really understand what is the key drivers in your business, operationally and people-wise, what are the positives and negatives sitting in your business, and obviously what is the valuation, and are you ready to exit now, and what are the steps you need to do to make these exit strategies work in the future. Starting that now gives you lots and lots of time to remedy a lot of issues, or it's simply a good sense check to say, I'm in a great shape, I'm doing everything right, let's just keep everything going and just keep on growing. But knowing the challenges ahead and starting now gives you lots and lots of time to be able to change, because you really don't know what's going to happen in the future personally or with your business. And an exit can happen in 5 years' time, you hope, but in 3 years' time, it might actually happen. It might happen in 6 months' time because somebody could come forward. And you don't want to have your business devalued because you haven't started that preparation stage.
Absolutely. So we are coming into the final couple of minutes here. So are there any kind of final words of wisdom that you two would like to leave the audience with?
I can see Ali is burning to say something.
No, actually, I was going to say I feel like we've covered it. I think I feel like that kind of was quite cohesive.
Yeah.
I think the final point I would just make and just reiterate, Charlotte, is that your business is a people-based business. You're dealing business to business, so your clients are a people-based business as well. So understanding that your people, whether you're looking to sell your business or not looking to sell your business, are going to be the ones that drive your growth organically, are going to drive your business forward negatively, or people who can't be retained are either going to pull your business back, or you're going to spend a lot of money looking to keep on recruiting. So understanding your people, having clear processes and procedures in place for your business, and really looking to connect with your people to get the best out of them. There's a very quick story that I know, which is called the Law of the Lid, and the owner who allows the people to grow and develop below them and keeps on growing, developing themselves, are the owners and the businesses that grow faster than a business which is very static and owners just say enough is enough.
Absolutely. So that does bring us to the end of today's webinar. Thanks to both of you for sharing your insights with us there, and thanks everyone at home for joining us. If you do want to follow up with Gary and the Venture Corporate Finance team, or Alia and the 4 Pillars team, there are some details on the screen to point you in the right direction. This will also be available on demand. So if you did spot anything here that would be useful to share with your team or a friend or colleague, do ping that across to them when it arrives with you later. But otherwise, thanks everyone for joining us, and goodbye.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.